All parents who are grieving their children would love to hear from them after death. Well, this mom actually did. Angels. We all have them. They're our unseen guides, our companions, our teachers, and they're all around us. Sometimes they make themselves known in the most miraculous ways. Join me, Level 3 QHHT practitioner, angel communicator, and Reiki master, Christy Clemens Hoffman, with stories from real people who have experienced uplifting phenomena and real-life angel encounters. Welcome back to Real Life Angel Encounters, the podcast that puts the positivity in the paranormal and spirits in your spirituality. I'm your host, Christy Clemens Hoffman, and I am thrilled to be here with our guest today. But before we get too much further, I wanted to ask for your help to help us grow the show. There's several ways that you can help. One is to share the show. If you like this episode, if you like the show in general, you like to hear about angelic encounters and miracles in real people's lives, you can share with your friends, your family, your coworkers, your high school friends, your dog walkers, your network. Please share the show. And if somebody tells you something wonderful that happened to them, suggest, hey, you really ought to go on the Real Life Angel Encounters podcast and tell that story. I'd love to have them. And the more people that listen to this podcast, the more great stories that we get. It's a win-win. Another way that you can help grow the show is to like, follow, subscribe, whatever it is, wherever you're listening. Give us a 5-star review, a thumbs up, write a little review. Everything helps in the algorithms. And then lastly, you can help support the show by donating to it and covering my out-of-pocket costs for it. You can go to radiatewellnesscommunity.com, my website, go to the podcast tab and click on donate to the podcast. All right. This episode of Real Life Angel Encounters, we feature the author of Through the Darkness, Charlie Bynar. Charlie is an author and international artist whose David Bowie portrait was featured in the Victoria and Albert Museum's 5-year traveling exhibition, David Bowie Is. Additionally, after her son died, Charlie founded Isaac's Ant Foundation and installed ant exhibits across the country in his memory, including at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. She published her first children's book, Charlie and the Rainbow Trout, in 2021, and Through the Darkness is her first work of narrative nonfiction. And now I am with Charlie Bynar, of the National Indie Excellence Award winner for 2025 in Death and Dying. And her book is Through the Darkness, A Story of Love from the Other Side, which I think is so up our alley here with Real Life Angel Encounters and the aftermath and communication with her son, Isaac, who died unexpectedly. So, hi, Charlie. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Christy?
Doing well. I'm happy to talk to you because this sounds like an extraordinary story that began in 2017. Can you tell us what happened?
Sure. I just first like to say, thanks for having me on your show. I've learned a lot from your interviews and they're very interesting. I appreciate what you do.
Oh, I'm so happy that you're listening. So make sure and hit the notification bell.
I did. Absolutely. So it's what happened was sometimes paranormal activities run in a family.
Yeah.
I've noticed that that's the case. And my family on my mother's side, the Williams family, has long told me stories ever since I was a little kid about when my grandmother died twice. My great-grandmother, Ethel, died twice. Here's the story with her. She was definitely one of the little angel people, but she died twice. Then my mom's mom also had paranormal activities, and my mom and my aunt and me, and even my son Isaac. So it's like just handed down through the Williams family. So we've had a bunch of things that happened. I had heard these stories as growing up, but I kind of just sort of dismissed it because I didn't really have any reason to dig in, So I just kind of, wow, that's kind of crazy stories, that sort of thing. But then when my son Isaac crossed from a seizure, he's my only son, and I love that kid more than just the universe itself. He's my everything. I wanted him. I relished every minute with him. He was the brightness of the day. He was just a wonderful person. And we had so much fun together. Anyway, during his delivery, it was over Christmas Eve, and they sent me home. I went into the hospital Christmas Eve. And so it was right by the holidays. There was like really ramping up there. They sent me home saying it could be false labor. And so I walked through the night, paced the floor, couldn't sleep because there was so much pain and everything. Went back to the hospital in the morning, like she told me. She said, if it doesn't, subside, then come back in the morning. I did. And then they still didn't deliver him until 25 and a half hours later after that. And so he was delivered Christmas Eve at 8 o'clock in the evening. I had already been in contractions for 36 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, because of people get distracted during holidays and things like that. And then they also maybe just don't want to be at the hospital, or they have something planned, or I don't know. But is how it played out with Isaac and me was that he had the cord around his neck twice during that entire time, and he was being strangled. And had they been watching the fetal heart monitor more closely, then they would have said, that his heart was in distress, and they could have done an emergency. They could have done a C-section 25 hours earlier than they had, because the first signs of distress was 25 and a half hours prior to his delivery. So had they actually been paying attention, he would have been fine. But because they delayed so long, he sustained a hypoxic brain injury at birth. And he didn't talk until he was 5, had just tremendous difficulties learning, was special needs, struggled through school, was bullied because he was special needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Often a brain injury creates secondary insults, if you will. And so then because of the brain injury, he developed seizures, and that's actually what killed him. So he died as a result of negligent hands, which is pretty hard to swallow. And it took me a long time to figure it out. What I've noticed is it's easier to deny something so horrific. It's easier to say, no, 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 no. And you kind of push it out of your mind, and you hope for the best. Like that didn't happen, but it did. And I wasn't able to publish the book unless I could prove it, because that would set me up and the publisher for liability, because I basically say and tell the story as it happened. Anyway, so Isaac and I, we were just thick as thieves. We were buds. He was my rock. He was just everything for me. So when he died, especially at the hands of negligent hands, when he should have been alive, should not have died, it just threw me into a real tangle of darkness, and I had a very hard time coming out of that place. It took me about 3 years. In the first year, I asked the hospital for medical records because I had the right to my medical records, right? I was kind of hell-bent on trying to get the fetal heart monitor strips, because they're not subject to opinion. They're just the factual data, right? And they pushed back and they pushed back and they pushed back. And I finally, I said, per Arizona law, you have to comply with blah, 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 blah. And I did get them to send me the hard copy paperwork, but they pushed back and pushed back with the fetal heart monitor and gave me the runaround for 11 months, and then told me that I wasn't going to receive any fetal heart monitors, even though they told me that they had found them, but they couldn't print them. And then they said, oh, we can only print the very beginning, but we can't print the last 6 hours. Like, obviously, like, I mean, you think I'm an idiot. So is what they said was, here's your paper copies. And as far as the fetal heart monitor strips, I never got any. But I did get in that paperwork, I found a note buried in this pile of paperwork where a nurse had written a little teeny note that said, Christmas Eve, when I had first went in the first time, that there was already tracings that the heart was already having difficulties. And then it said, but the physician or the midwife, I had a midwife and a doctor, she sent me home in spite of having alarming fetal heart monitor contractions. And so that actually was the smoking gun, because they knew 25 hours prior to him being delivered. Anyway, that was what happened prior to the story of
Right.
my book, this
Yes, through
through the darkness. And that's Isaac when he was probably 6 or 7. And I took him on hiking through Bryce Canyon up in Utah, and it's a beautiful place. So that was the backstory. I had to give you the backstory so that it would make sense to you. But so then Isaac died. So then there I was just in a world of misery. And 2 weeks after he crossed, I kept thinking that I was hearing him talking to me in my dreams. So many years went by. Isaac's dad and I got divorced when he was about 7. And then I got remarried to my high school sweetheart, gosh, about 5 or 6 years later. And so I was married at the time to my second husband, Chris, at the time when Isaac crossed. Anyway, Isaac crossed, and Chris was such a sweetie. He was so supportive. He helped me get all the records, and it was just a nightmare. But the thing is so 2 weeks later, after Isaac crosses, I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh my God, I just heard Isaac talking to me in my dreams. And he had a very specific message, though, is the thing. And I don't know if you've ever had a dream visit, but it's like a bunch of nonsensical noise and pictures. It's like a silent movie, dreams are often. I don't think that there's a lot of audio involved. But then all of a sudden it was like super clear. And I couldn't see Isaac, but I could hear him. And he whispered in my ear, he said, I miss you. And I was like, oh my God, I miss you too. And then I woke up because my heart was pounding. And I told my husband, Chris, and he thought, oh my God, so now we've lost Isaac and now my wife's going crazy because she's, talking to her dead son, right? But then it happened like 4 more times, and each time it was a very specific message. The second message was, he said, dreams are a way for people to communicate with people on the other side. He was like educating me in my dreams about how things worked. And then, of course, I told my husband, Chris, and he was like, she's going crazy. And so there was a whole bunch of these dynamics going on. And as that kept happening to me, I mean, I just kept thinking like, well, is death the end? And then so this is what led on to the question of digging into this subject, because previous in my life, I had no inclination to really dig into all this. Is dead dead? And is there an afterlife? And all those questions. So now it was like right there in front of me, and it was begging for answers. And I kept having, one thing that was a really fun little thing that happened was I went and saw 2 mediums. I had done a lot of research about the scientific stuff about afterlife, like quantum mechanics and all that kind of stuff, and superposition, and and it was really wonderful. And I also investigated a lot of religion, and I found that was interesting too. But I still didn't really have that. I still was on the fence of whether or not there was really an afterlife or not. And I was hoping so, because, man, I really wanted to see Isaac again. I didn't want him to be dead. I wanted him to be at least somewhere where I could find him again or something. Anyway, but I was in the super dark place. And so I kept having these, little dream visits. And then what happened was, even though a couple years go by and I had investigated all these things, nothing really gave me that solid feeling. And so people kept saying, why don't you go see a medium? I hadn't even really thought of it. It was suggested to me a few times, and I thought, well, maybe the universe is knocking on my door and I better get the clue. And so I went and saw this one medium, and one thing that she told me a bunch of really interesting things, but I'm gonna jump to a thing that she had me do an exercise, a meditation sort of exercise, because she was like, you need to hear from Isaac. And I'm like, yeah, that would be great. And so she said, it was what you do is lay down in your bed, and when everything's super quiet, and then think about your day consecutively backwards so that you can kind of clear the noise from the day out. So the last thing I did was I brushed my teeth. Before that, I did put my pajamas on or whatever. So you get rid of the day's noise, and then you just envision yourself going through a garden, and you get to choose what kind of garden it is, because it's your garden. And since Isaac was all things Japanese, it was a Japanese garden. So, a little koi pond and a little bridge and, bonsai trees and things of that nature. Anyway, so I'm walking through the garden and I see a little bridge, and I see the little figure on the bridge, and I think, gosh, can that be Isaac, And so I kind of quicken my pace, and I kind of go to the bridge. And as I step on the bridge, he turns towards me. And so this is all like imagination, meditation. And so there I am with Isaac, and I just grab him, and I'm like, oh my God, you've got to find a way to like let me know you're okay because I need help. I'm in a bad place. I really need your help. I was really, begging him to help me because I was in trouble. And then my cat jumped on top of me and it startled me out of that meditation. But I had already asked him for the sign.
Mm.
Everybody was asleep, and my husband was sleeping in the other room because at the time he had been diagnosed with cancer and he was a very restless sleeper. And so I was working as a nurse and I had to sleep. So I started sleeping in Isaac's room because I had to be on my game when I went to work. So everybody was asleep is the thing. And the dogs were asleep and the cat was, I don't know where he went to, but everybody was asleep. And there I am laying in Isaac's room and I wake up and the light in the hall is on. And I'm like, that's really strange. And when I get up to see what it was there's a motion sensor on the laundry light. You have to trigger it, it has to have a motion. And he had popped that light on. The laundry light the motion sensor had been triggered.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then the thing is that was his go-to for the next like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
All the time he would pop the light on. I would just be in the kitchen. Nobody else would be in the house. And the laundry light would pop on. It would just pop on all the time. That was his go-to of a way to say, hi, I'm here.
Ask you this, Charlie. Had you been thinking of him when the light would come on, or been doing anything special?
Well, the first time was me specifically asking for a sign, like, can you please help me? Then the light popped on. So I always associated that with him every time it popped on because I just knew it was him. It was like his way of letting me know that he was there.
So yeah, the subsequent times that the light came on, you just took it as here he is just stopping by to say hi.
Yeah, just like, hi, I'm here. Just a little wink, wink, hi, or, I love you, or I'm just here. And it was really common. And then it's only happened once I kind of got over the hump of feeling okay, then the light didn't come on nearly as much. And it's only come on once in the last 2 years. So, but the journey for Isaac, as far as like him being my angel, because he really is my angel. He's still looking over me. And the thing that I thought was really interesting was then I had decided to go see Allison DuBois, who is a really famous medium, world renowned. She's the lady who inspired the TV series Medium. It was like 8 seasons or something like that, which is really cool. Anyway, so I went to see her and I was really apprehensive and nervous about going because she's kind of famous. And also I was just mostly worried about like, does this work? And if so, then what's Isaac going to say? And how's that going to work? And I was just kind of nervous about the whole thing, really. Anyway, so there I was in my closet that morning of the appointment. She lives in Scottsdale, so just a couple hours south of me. And so I was in my closet trying to figure out what to wear. And I always have like a shirt and then something over it. And I had a t-shirt on and I just couldn't figure out what else to put on. And I kept looking. I was like, no, 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 that doesn't work. And I just couldn't figure out what it was. And then I just kind of kept looking at the clothes. And then I was like, and my eyes landed on Isaac's hoodie. It's like a gray and maroon hoodie. And I was like, well, that's the right thing to wear. So I put it on. I got his hoodie on. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. And I went down to see her and she's super, super nice lady. So she puts you at ease, so I was relaxed in first 5 minutes. It was easy transition. And she says, okay, first I had mentioned, but I need to mention it a little bit more at this time, this is like 2.5 years after Isaac crossed, but my husband had already been diagnosed with cancer for 6 months and he was on trial meds. The trial meds had made him feel better. He was able to go skiing and biking. So he was doing pretty good compared to, he could barely walk in things prior to. So the trial meds were doing pretty darn good. So that was our situation at the time of that reading with Allison. And so I went to go see her and she said, okay, well, you first asked me about life events or, she said, what do you want to talk about? And I said, oh, I need to talk to you about my husband. And I was worried because, what if she might tell me something bad, Those kinds of things can be nerve-wracking in a way. But she said, we talked about Chris and she said, it's not going to go the way you think it's going to go. The trial drugs are not going to work the way you want them to work. And it's going to happen really quick and it's going to be and it's going to be within the next 6 months.
Wow.
And I was just like, she goes, I just have to tell you so that you'll be prepared because you asked me. Of course, she's not going to tell me. I asked. So that's the thing. And so I kind of didn't know how much stock to put into her, what she was saying too, because at the time I said I was still on the fence about all these things, right? So I kind of listened, very open-minded about it, but that's what she said. And I kind of didn't really know how to respond. And so that actually ended up happening exactly how she said. It came to pass just that way. In retrospect, then afterwards, I was just like, oh my gosh, that's like crazy. But then the thing that she told me about, and then she said, okay, let's talk about the person that you want to talk to that's on the other side. She says, who is it? And I said, it's my son, Isaac. And so she said, okay, I'm gonna like connect with Isaac. And so she does her thing. And, 4.5 minutes later, she started smiling. She said, the first thing he wants you to know is that you were his best friend, that you guys were best friends. And I was just like, that was exactly what he would say. Right. And then she started laughing, and she's got this really kind of funny laugh. It's cute. But anyway, I was like, well, what's so funny? And she said, Isaac tried to get you to wear his shirt today.
What?
Yeah. And I had just put it on. I just put it on and I had driven there. And that's the second thing she's told me. He tried to get you to wear his shirt today. And at that moment, I was like, oh, okay, that's Isaac. I mean, there is just no flipping way. I mean, I knew Isaac was alive and well. I left that reading knowing that the afterlife was absolutely true, and that death is relative, that death is not the end, that our time on earth is like one page of a never-ending story. This is a place where we parked for a while. Or anyway, she kept saying so many crazy things in that thing. One thing that the medium knew was at the time of Isaac's death, this one is very trippy also, is that at the time when he died, I was in Winslow, Arizona, 45 minutes from where I live. And I couldn't get a hold of Isaac, and it was scaring me. And I asked my ex to hurry and go to my house because he only lived like a mile away. And I said, please go and check on Isaac. You got to go check on Isaac for me. And I was driving home. David called me and said, Isaac, he found him on the floor, dead.
Oh, no.
And at the time I was on the phone, and he had called the paramedics, and the paramedics arrived. And I'm just trying to get to town. I mean, I'm like on the highway somewhere and my heart's going nuts. And I can hardly drive because I think I lost all the blood pressure, and my hands were tingling and numb, and I could barely drive. And David was crying on the other side, and he's like, I don't think he's okay. And the paramedics jumped his heart and got a pulse. And so they took him to the emergency room. And as they were going through town, I came into town and saw them at the intersection, and I chased him to the hospital. Anyway, during that course of that night, I learned that he was brain dead, but they had pumped his heart full of meds, and it was just keeping his heart racing at 140 beats per minute. And so that was not really a great place for him to be in limbo. But I was freaking out, and I was screaming, and I couldn't understand rationally what was going on. I had to take a little time to let it sink in. And as I was just reeling with what was going on, I just needed to be close to Isaac. So I crawled in bed with him on the gurney in the room. And there was all these IVs and meds, and he was on a vent. And so there's all these hoses, and I crawled in between all the machinery and vents and tubes, and I laid next to him and for about an hour. And then I just knew he was in a bad place, and I just knew what I had to do. And so I looked up at David, Isaac's dad, and I said, are you okay if I pull the plug? And he said, yeah. So I went to the doctor and I said, stop the vent and stop the cardiac meds. And so it was only like 2 seconds later, and he was pronounced dead. But it was just the worst thing. It's the nightmare of nightmares. It really is. It's the worst thing you can do, be forced to do, or something. It's just no words really can convey that kind of trauma. But then the medium later, she told me, she said, when Isaac was in the in-between place where he wasn't crossed over, but he wasn't here. She said the one thing that he really remembers was your heart beating next to his, and it really like soothed his heart.
Wow. I can't imagine how that must have felt.
So he even told me that he knew about the heart. He was aware of my heart beating next to his body. And so, I mean, there's just no way you would ever know that kind of information other than it would be Isaac telling it through a medium. And so that's actually what convinced me completely, was because those are things that, I mean, only Isaac would know.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So after that, then I really realized that Isaac was taking care of me. And that's where the angel story comes into play, is that, so that's like a lot of backstory, because, but it's important, you have to have all that understanding to see how then Isaac was actually trying to help me from the other side to save my life, because he knew I was in trouble and he was doing everything he possibly could to get my attention so that I wouldn't do something that I regretted, and that I still had work to do here, and that I would definitely see him again when it was the right time. So I just felt like after that, and then I started understanding everything, that he really is my guardian angel. And oh, and then here's a cute little thing, because I asked Allison about it, because man, her reading was probably 99% accurate. I can't even think of anything that didn't make sense or that didn't happen. She nailed it. But one thing she did tell me, she said, Isaac is an incredibly bright white light and he's looking over you. And I said, a bright white light, I kind of questioned, and because I didn't know any of this stuff. And she goes, a really bright white light, what people here would call an angel. He's your angel. And so she even said he is like what an angel is, and that he would look after me for the rest of my life and come and get me. And I was just like, oh my God, what an amazing kid. I just love that little kid beyond belief. Like, there's no words. And so he's certainly my little angel. He gets me through all the tough stuff. And when he was really small, he got me through all the tough stuff, and now he's still doing that. So there is no, death does not divide, death does not separate. Your relationship changes, it has different dynamics, but I'm still connected to him.
Yeah, you are. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Wow. So this after death communication is really real. I mean, I hope that
Absolutely.
gives you.
Yeah, no, and I've had so many other things that has happened with him. There was one, dream visits and lights, and then here's I'll tell you a really fun one. Do you want to hear one with my Aunt Mabel?
Yes.
Okay, and it involves Isaac again getting messages through to me, because he was my angel trying to help me out, because he knew how dark it was for me, because and when she said he feels so sorry that he had to cross at the time that he did. Like, he had ran out of time and he had stayed as long as he could, but he actually ran out of time. It was like, your time's up,
Oh,
and you have to cross. It's like his time it was here. And he said he didn't want to go, but he had to. But that he felt really, really sorry that it hurt me so much. And I'm like, well, geez, it's not his fault. It was his time. But anyway, back to my Aunt Mabel and how it relates to Isaac, because he's my little angel guy, true angel story of helping his mom, who's in a bad place on the other side. And so one of the things that I had done was, my Aunt Mabel, who was on the Williams family I was telling you about, who has all those paranormal activities through the generations, like 6 generations back. Well, she was one of them, and she lives in Elko, Nevada at the time. And I had always wanted to go see her right after Isaac crossed. And so I went to see her. And one morning when I was there, it was pretty early in the morning, I was working on a kid's book, and I was just explaining it. It was called Charlie and the Rainbow Trout. It was about me saving a trout when I was like 5 years old or something. It was just a cute little story. Anyway, that's what I was doing on my computer. I was working on the layout of the text and the pictures and stuff like that. And it was early in the morning, and because I couldn't sleep, when you're traveling. And so I got up and I made some coffee, and there I was. And she comes out of her bedroom and she says, well, hi, honey. What's got you up so early? She was always that kind of cute little lady. And I said, well, I was just I couldn't sleep. And so I was, working on this book. And I said, here, I'll just show you the little pictures. And so I showed her the cover, and she goes, oh, that's so darling of you. That was like when you were just little teeny tyke. And, we were just kind of reminiscing about things like that. It was cute. And then I kept telling her about the other parts of the story. And, here's illustration 2, and here's what it's going to say. And we were just kind of going through like that. She was standing right next to me, but then all of a sudden she just stops what she was doing, and she just looks up to the ceiling like this,
yes.
and just freezes for like 4 seconds, and then looks back at me, and she goes, I just got a message, and the message is, good job, Mom. And she said, oh my God, that had to be Isaac. So the thing is I had told her the reason that I was writing the book was because I wanted to make Isaac proud. And then he replies, "Good job, Mom." And that was like in real time communication. That was the trippiest thing that has ever happened to me because that was like real time communication via my aunt, mind you. And my aunt's like this 83-year-old woman that's very religious, sweet as pie, just the cutest thing. There was just no way to explain that other than he was just replying to me. He was still watching over me through all this. It's just incredible. And so I asked my Aunt Mabel, I said, how did you get that message? Like, did you hear it? Did you read it? I mean, how did you get a message? Like, how does that work? And she said, I have no idea. I don't know what to tell you. It's just, it was there. That was the message.
Yeah, as a medium myself,
Right.
how it works. I mean, it's energy, all that's all I know, but and consciousness, but how wonderful. Do you feel like you've gotten any of that? You said that and it has stair step down the family and it does tend to run in families.
I think I was only like I was able to get the dream visits, and I've had many different things happen with Isaac that are all related to communication from the other side, but not like a medium, not like how mediums can hear things and relay messages. I can't do that. I just got some messages in my dream, and there were certain things like the lights, like my laundry light flipping on. And I would get very kind of in your face signs like that, in your face signs, I would say. Not like little teeny things, but like, okay, wake up and smell the coffee kind of like things. Like Aunt Mabel, that one tripped me out. And we spoke about that several times before she crossed. Now she's with Isaac, so yay for them. Yeah. And so I never was able to do that kind of thing, but I became very aware of his presence through all kinds of different things that ways that he would get a hold of me. Like one time as my husband got sick, more sick, the trial drugs started not working very well. Then he was sick again. We went back and forth to Houston to MD Anderson for 11 months with mantle cell. It's a rare cancer and you can't win it. Anyway, we went back and forth and back and forth. And as Allison told me, she said, it's going to be his lungs and you've got this much time and it's going to come out of nowhere. She said, it's just going to come out of nowhere like that. And you won't even, it'll just happen. And it'll be kind of a shock. And I was like, okay, well, but like, again, I didn't know how much to put into stock of it at the time. So I was just kind of like, I had heard the message and I was trying to be aware of things, I guess. Anyway, there I was in Houston, and after 11 months of battling cancer with Chris, and now the trial drugs were failing. They had taken him to dialysis, and he was getting dialysis through a central line in his throat. It was awful. Anyway, so that morning they took him to dialysis, and the rounding doctor comes in and she says, I don't really know how to tell you this, but you need to talk to your husband when he gets back from dialysis because he only has 2 to 3 days to live. And you need to tell him that, and you need to decide whether or not you're going to let him pass here. We can take care of him, and we can take care of him for 2 days, or we can discharge him into your care and you can get him home. And I was just like, what the? I mean, I was like, I don't know how to say all that. And I don't know how to do all that. And I am not prepared for that. And it just freaked me out. And then I was watching the clock. He was supposed to be back at like, I don't know, 10 or something. And I'm just thinking, I just don't want you to come in the door because I can't do that.
Oh,
Anyway, the door opens. He's back from dialysis. The guy leaves, he puts him in bed, and I sat down next to Chris and I got his pillows arranged for him. And I said, I don't know how to tell you this, but I talked to the doctor and she said, you have 2 to 3 days to live. And then I just started like bawling. Like I was hysterical. I wasn't a little bit crying. I was like pacing the floor and hysterical. And I said, and I know you don't want to die in the hospital. You told me you didn't want to die in the hospital. So do you want me to take you home? What do you want me to do? And I said, do you want me to take you home? And he was feeling so bad and his throat hurt so much at the time that he couldn't talk. And so he just said, he nodded yes. He wanted me to take him home.
Oh my God. Here you are in grief over your son.
I know. So my son's crossed and I'm just already my heart's, I really didn't know how much I could take. The thing is you learn that you can do more than you really think you can when you're push comes to shove. But there I am in Houston. It's 20-mile-hour drive from Houston to home. And I've got to figure out how to get Chris home. This was during COVID time. And the night before, they didn't let me into the hospital. I fought with the hospital for that entire day to get into the hospital. So then I got into the hospital and then I could see how bad Chris was. And so I couldn't sleep. I hadn't slept that night. So then we go to all the next day. And then now we have 2 days to live in Houston. And I have to figure out how to get Chris home so he can die.
Oh, Charlie.
And so I didn't know what to do. So what do? You call on your angel.
Of course you do.
Anyway, so there I am. I lit the candle in the windowsill and I'm like, Isaac, I really, really, really need your help right now. I'm like in such a pickle. I'm in such a hard place and I really don't know what to do. I'm afraid to drive to home because it's 20 hours and I haven't slept and I'm already exhausted and I'm flipped out and I don't even know if it's safe. But Chris wants me to take him home and I want to do what's right for him and I don't know what to do. So I said, can you please tell me if it's safe for me to take Chris home? And I just got a yes. I just got a yes. I don't know how I got the yes. I got a yes. It was probably kind of a similar thing like with Aunt Mabel, maybe actually. I just kind of knew that the answer was yes. And so I said, okay, Chris, I have to get you in the car. I have to get you we have to go. And then the thing is it takes like 11 hours to get him discharged. I had to get the central line removed from his neck. I had to get DNR paperwork printed and okayed. I had to get oxygen tanks so that he could have oxygen to breathe on the way home. It took the oxygen people 11 hours to deliver the oxygen to the hospital so I could drive home. So that night I left Houston like midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, and I got 20 hours to drive and I'm already in a major bad way. Anyway, I got home because Isaac helped me. I know that that's the case. But the journey was that I left early in the morning and then my sister was waiting for me at home because you have to have care at your home before they will even agree to discharge so that somebody will receive on the other end, a nurse and, like hospice care. And so I had arranged that. My sister was here waiting for me and I would just go through the night and I got into San Antonio and I just text her San Antonio. And that's all I would do. I would fill up the car with gas and I'd text her the location and I kept driving. Chris didn't have to go to the bathroom. His kidneys failed. And I didn't stop for coffee or eating or anything. We just drove. We stopped only for gas and that was it. And I drove and drove and drove. And then parts of Texas are like 8-hour stretches of just it's like really long roads in Texas. And I finally get from, San Antonio into El Paso as like 8-hour stretch of just highway. And the highway will kind of put you to sleep, that like repetitive rhythm of flashing white line in the road and everything. And when you're already exhausted, it was just, I got into El Paso and I could hardly stay awake. I mean, I was like, my brain was drifting. And even though El Paso traffic is really bustling, it's like not sleeping kind of stuff. It's it's busy, busy, busy. Anyway, I knew I was in real trouble for I couldn't stay awake. I just couldn't. And so I looked in the console and I looked for anything to keep me awake and I couldn't find anything. Then I found some of my nursing scissors in the compartment, which was crazy because that was Chris's car and I never keep my nursing gear in.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but there they were. So it was like one of those, unexplained things. But there was my scissors. Anyway, I pushed it into my leg, into my thighs, just to, not just to keep my focus I just needed something to concentrate my focus. And so I didn't puncture the skin or anything. I just needed something and then about 45 minutes later, I got a second wind and I was able to pull into my house like at 7:30 that evening. And it was all I could do really to get him home. And poor Chris, by the time we got home, the nurse hurrying took his O2 and he was at 50%. It was very bad. I mean, he barely had enough strength to walk from the garage to the bed, laid him down, got him comfortable. And he was really sweet. He goes, he tried to say, I love you, but he could only get the I part out. He was like, I. And then I was like, I got it, just relax. And so he was like, okay. And I got the dogs up laying next to him and they laid down next to him. And I said, you're safe. You're home. This is where you want to be. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here. And my sister was like, you look exhausted. You've got to lay down next to Chris. And she put a blanket over me. And I fell asleep right next to him. Well, before I went to sleep, when he said, when he was trying to struggle that, and I said, I know you love me. It's okay. And I said, just close your eyes and you're okay. And he said, oh, he kind of nodded, and then he closed his eyes, and that was the end of it. But I laid next to him. He was asleep. He went to sleep. But I was laying next to him, and had my hand on his heart. And then like 6 hours later, at like 1:30 in the morning, it was like 1:27. I remember looking at the clock because I just startled. I mean, I should have just been dead asleep, but something startled me out of my sleep. I think it was Isaac, because he needed me to be awake, because I just watched Chris take the last 2 breaths. And I told Chris, I was like, you better darn well find a way to let me know that you're okay on the other side. When you get over there, you better let me know. And I said, safe journey, and, and all that kind of thing. And then a couple of days later, and here's a kind of a cute little thing and I never even thought about it when I wrote the book, but the beginning of the book starts with the tragic death of Isaac. But Chris, on the other hand, his death was a good death. And so there's different ways you can see when people cross. But Chris's death was actually a good death. It was a death that he chose. And it wasn't any pain, wasn't any misery or anything like that. And anyway, and I had told him, try to get a hold of me or let me know that you're okay or whatever. And then my sister, a couple days later, she's always like cleans the house or does things to tidy up just to like for distraction and that kind of thing. And so she was like, hey, Charlie, see that little moon over there in the background?
Oh, yes.
See the moon
Yes,
back there? She
yeah.
goes, isn't that the moon lamp that Chris got you and for your birthday? And I said, yeah. And she goes, well, we should leave it plugged in for Chris. And I said, that's a great idea. And we had seen a similar moon like that at the Houston Natural Museum of History there. It was like a moon 1,000,000 times its size or something. That was like a small replica of it. Anyway, that night we left the moon on like that, white. So this is like 3 days after Chris crosses. And I'm sleeping in Isaac's room in the back hall again, and my sister's in the other room. And I wake up and the light's on again. And then it was like, that's weird though, because the light was fading back and forth. It was getting like really bright, and then it was dimming, and then it was going back and forth. And I was like, okay, that's not the laundry light, because the laundry light's just on or not. And so I had to get up to see what was going on. And it wasn't the laundry light. The moon was on, and I had turned the moon off. And then I was like, oh my God, the moon's on. But it wasn't, see how it just white? But it was fading back and forth and like that. And it was at 1:27 in the morning. It was exactly the same time that Chris crossed. And I looked at the microwave in the kitchen, and I noticed that all the appliance lights were black. Like there was no energy. I looked out the window into the neighborhood, and it was pitch black. The power was out in the entire neighborhood, except my moon was glowing a very, very bright in the night.
The power went out in the neighborhood.
I went out on my front porch, and all the street lights were out, everything. The entire neighborhood was black.
Oh my.
But my moon was on.
At 1:27 a.m.
That's what I say, like in your face.
Yeah, I always say you cannot make this up.
Yeah, well, that one you couldn't make up, and then I just stood there and I was like, oh my God, you did, send me a sign. And I knew that he was fine and he was having probably a good time with Isaac, so now I don't really think of death as the same way. It's not like it's hard on me because I miss Isaac, but I'm really happy for him because he suffered here because of his health, because of his brain injury, and so I'm really happy that he no longer suffers, and I'm just glad he's free, and that I feel really grateful and fortunate that I have such a precious angel watching over me.
You do.
Oh, so see, it went from like pure darkness to pure gratitude.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's a true angel story.
Yes, it is. I think the title for this episode is going to be her Angel BFF.
Oh yeah, he's my Angel BFF. Absolutely. Oh, in fact, do you see that picture on my homepage, the BFF?
I love it.
Yeah, angel BFF.
Oh my
Yeah, so angels absolutely exist and they watch over us. And even though, what I learned was that even though we might not understand what's all going on in our lives, there's always these, like, sometimes it brings up an opportunity for a life lesson. It's all about these life lessons. And, it's not like, okay, that was a crappy thing that happened or that was really painful. It's like, what can you do with it now? So it's not enough to just say that really was not good. The thing is what do you do with it, And the thing that I've chose to do with it that is a constructive way for me to handle things is to say, what can I learn from this situation? I might not understand all of it, but I've got to this place at least where I can like trust, even though I don't necessarily understand everything. I know that there's life lessons and that, so you can always be grateful for the opportunities to learn things.
Yes, that is so true. And you turned your experience into a book called
Yes.
The Darkness, which can be found on your website. And I should say the subtitle as well, Through the Darkness, a Story of Love from the Other Side.
Yeah.
Wow. So all of this can be found on your website, charliebynar.com or Charlie Bynar, right? Is that how you
Charlie Bynar.
Bynar, thank you. .com. So there's a lot of resources here too. In fact, your other book, your children's book, Charlie and the Rainbow Trout, that is so cute. To honor loved ones. I love this, painting little
Yeah, it's like kind of like a resource website so that you can find, because the thing that I found is when I started investigating this, there was like, I had to do a lot of digging myself. And so I thought, well, why not put a resource page together and ways to honor people, your loved ones, whether it's your child or other ones. Because the thing is when you are deep in sorrow and you get stuck in the quicksand, if you work with your hands rather than be stuck in your head, it can help you process the grief as you're working on something. So I would always keep myself busy with a project, whether it was writing the book or whether it was, I just did all kinds of things. I raised ant colonies and took them all over the United States and installed them in museums. I have an ant colony in the Museum of Natural History in New York City in Central Park. And it's all about Isaac because he loved ants. And so I kept myself busy doing constructive things, and that was a constructive way to process grief while you're going through it rather than, finding yourself in darkness. You got to kind of be your own best advocate and say, oops, I'm in this place and I need to do something so that I don't do something I wished I wouldn't have. Like, because often people get lost in sorrow and then they reach for substance abuse, or you can make bad choices because you're in a bad place. So it's best to find ways to do something constructive, and that's why I put all that list of ways to honor loved ones together, because there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can keep yourself active in memory of your loved one and do something constructive for them.
Right, right. In fact, your website is full of wonderful resources about death and dying as well. So the link is in the show description. Thank you so much for joining me today to share your story of hope and healing and, your way out of grief. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. And if anybody wants to get a copy of Through the Darkness, you can find it on Amazon or any of the big booksellers. But you can also, for the next, I think, 3 months, you can get it at booksirens.com, and it's a free download PDF. So you can read it for free, and they encourage reviews, and you know how important book reviews are.
They're
So
huge. In fact, anybody listening now, please review Real Life Angel Encounters.
yeah.
Important.
So this is one you can register your book, Christy, on booksirens.com, and they put it up there and they help you get reviews. And you give them a free PDF. And so if anybody wants to read the story, you can go to booksirens.com, Google, and then search my book, and then download a PDF for free.
But leave a review.
But leave a review. So you might want to try that too.
I'm going to try that. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today, Charlie. This has been a beautiful story, even with all of the tragedy surrounding
Right.
it gives us
Right.
hope. So thank
Yeah, well, sometimes we can learn the greatest and receive the greatest gifts from difficult challenges that we face. And so you can turn it around and see what you can learn from something.
you. Absolutely. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and follow, and be sure to share this episode. The more people who know about this podcast, the more great story submissions we get. Have a story to share? Email your own real-life angel encounter to angelencounterspodcast@gmail.com or visit radiatewellnesscommunity.com/real-life angel encounters podcast. Or join our Facebook group and continue the discussion. Want to know what your angels and loved ones have to tell you? Schedule an appointment with me at radiatewellnesscommunity.com. A special thanks to James Wheeler for the original music and to Tiffany Baumgarten for the logo design.